Hi, everybody. This is John Spalding with S&G Endeavors, and I have Sam Ollinger from Bike San Diego. She's the executive director of that organization. This is part three of our blog series that we have produced together. And this is our video hangout just to kind of check in and since their board retreat and talk about some of their successes and also seeing what's up with them right now and what's on the horizon. So, Sam, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here as well.
Cool. We have a couple questions for you today. First, tell everyone a little bit about Bike SD. What's some history, a couple things leading up to the retreat, and then and kind of the current state.
Sure. The very short history is Bike SD originally started as a blog. It was bikesd.org. It started in 2009, the summer of 2009. Two friends and myself got together to start the blog to talk about issues around bicycling with a focus on commuting or just riding for transportation. And that was documented in the first blog post. And eventually we realized that we were doing enough advocacy that it warranted formalizing the work that was being done through the blog. And so we incorporated Bike SD into a formal nonprofit in 2012. We wound up getting some unexpected and expected successes to a point that a lot of my advisors and friends urged me to further professionalize what the organization was doing. And I realized last year, in 2014, that we needed to really professionalize the work we were doing. And so part of that included having a formal structure and a game plan or a strategic plan. And having worked with Jeremy Grandstaff before at two separate organizations in creating their strategic plans, I was really impressed with his work. And I was very honored when he agreed to work with us in creating our strategic plan. And a lot of that came together earlier this year. And my board then formally unanimously adopted the entire strategic framework in May of this year. So that started a new phase for the organization where we would be much more strategic and formal and professionalized going forward, where we used to be pretty much an all volunteer run organization previously.
Sure. You said in 2012 you had some success. What were some of the things that happened kind of back then? What was to make the transition from a blog to a a full-fledged cycling advocacy organization is it takes a lot of work. So what happened back then that kind of stood out and you guys all looked around and said, "Wow, we really have something here."
2012, we had it was election year in San Diego, so we had a mayor's election, and just pushing the issue around transportation and more specifically around bicycling. And that had never been done in San Diego's history prior to that in such a strong, focused way. So some of the candidates who wanted to distinguish themselves and who were riders themselves actually uh, decided to embrace cycling and what it represented for cities as part of their campaign, and that gave us a lot more local exposure than we would have otherwise gotten. That kickstarted sort of a snowball effect. So a lot of other candidates started to realize that this was the bike community as a whole, the riding community was very, very galvanized and very motivated to affect change in the city. So that was a target audience worth appealing to. And part of that is really because San Diego has a pretty low voter turnout. So understanding what needs are for a demographic that does have a propensity to vote and then targeting them specifically and delivering on that became essentially the core part of our initial focus.
Gotcha. Okay. What were a couple breakthroughs that you guys had from your board retreat that you had earlier this year? And congrats on presenting the full strategy to your board and getting it approved.
Yes, that was very exciting. One of the biggest breakthroughs, I mean, I am the co-founder of the organization, so a lot of my thought process in the last 2 years has been creating a good succession and a transition plan out, because there's no way I could do this for the rest of my life with the entire energy I've devoted to it the last couple of years. And so creating that environment where people could embrace and then adopt the vision for themselves was really a key part of the whole focus.
Hmm.
And having my board really take a whole leadership role was extremely gratifying. Every single one of the board members who participated, all our volunteers who participated, they really felt that this was their plan, this was their vision. And so I really didn't have a huge role in the overall strategic plan's creation itself. It was really everybody else was assembled. And that was the most gratifying thing for me to witness, of how many people did believe that San Diego could be a great city for biking, and how much time and energy they were willing to invest to make this plan a success.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, just for people that weren't there, how many people attended?
On the first day, I believe we had about 18, and the second day we had about half, almost a little over half that. So it's about, I believe it was about 10.
Okay. And then, so what have been some of the successes that you guys have had as an organization since that retreat?
Um, from an advocacy perspective, because that's really been the huge portion of our focus, we haven't had as many big successes as we have in the past. But some of the success has been organizational growth. Our supporter base that was in the 1200s at the beginning of the year in March is now over 1700. And by supporter base, I mean number of members, number of people who've donated individually, funds either on a recurring basis or a one-time basis. So our reach in terms of growing our financial supporter base has really grown. And that's been also very gratifying to see that a lot of San Diegans who believe in the mission, not necessarily people who ride bikes, do feel invested in our success. So that's been a very, very successful part that's happened since then. The other component of the success, I think, has been reaching out to communities that we haven't really done much of an engagement with. It's a lot of the underserved, poor communities in San Diego, and organizers there feel also very invested in the work we're doing, and are starting to realize how our focus on mobility does benefit their constituents as well.
That's really cool. And so on that, do you have any specific projects or any specific action items that you're working on with those underserved communities to further the reach out efforts?
Nothing has been finalized yet, but we're working on a program to, if all goes well in about a year, really making sure they have access, because that's one of the biggest barriers for a lot of these lower income communities. They may not actually have bikes, or if they do have bikes, they don't have the funding to necessarily fix them if they're unable to get around, or they feel unsafe. They don't feel invested in the civic process to effect change. So, educating them on how they can play a role in improving their own communities and their own neighborhoods. And the way we're looking at it is just phasing it out in incremental approaches, building trust, both within the individuals as well as the organizers who work on those communities. Those are sort of some of the ideas. And then having them feel welcome in being part of our organization by being involved in whatever capacity they feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's a process for
Mm-hmm.
advocacy and for education and getting people involved in kind of taking their own steps that they need to take in order to make a difference organizationally or otherwise.
Exactly.
Andy joined us.
Hey, Andy.
Hey Andy, how are you? Oh, hold on once. Andy, can you check your mute button? We can't hear you.
Andy's my board president, for those who don't
Gotcha.
know.
Cool. Well, Andy, thanks for joining us. I'm gonna make sure that you are unmuted in here. So So you are unmuted, so I'm not sure what's going on with your audio, but we will check in with you in a little bit and see if it's working. Cool, thanks, Sam. What have been so those are some good successes that you've had since your retreat, and it sounds like you guys are really doing some good stuff. Any challenges that come to mind that you've had?
Yes, there's been, I guess, to break it down, there have been two specific challenges. One has been, since our mission is pretty ambitious, our supporter base is pretty big. Knowing how to deliver and growing our capacity in order to deliver on those promises has been a little challenging in terms of understanding how to do so in a strategic way. The second has been we've had some advocacy setbacks, which has had some sort of an effect in our ability to organize successfully going forward. But I think that's also really motivated our supporter base in that they understand that the road ahead is not necessarily going to be smooth sailing. It's going to be very challenging. But it also comes with a silver lining in that we've gotten a lot more allied organizations who don't necessarily focus on mobility willing to assist in our success as well. So it's been sort of a two-fronted approach in dealing with those challenges.
Yeah, great. The challenge of advocacy. Can you speak not specifically about your organization, but can you speak a little bit more broadly about why that is a challenge for small nonprofits or for startup nonprofits?
I think broadly speaking, advocacy is a challenge regardless of the organizational size. One of the biggest barriers, I think, is educating the public on what the work is. And since advocacy is not a tangible good, the broader public doesn't necessarily see the effects of advocacy or its success until much later into the game. It doesn't matter what the issue is. For tangible effects to actually be realized, it takes sustained effort in order to get there. So for our purposes, the end goal and the tangible deliverable is really going to be bike lanes, be it protected bike lanes or bike parking, whatever sort of bike facilities we're trying to create on the ground. But to get from where we are to actually having those assets implemented on the ground, there's a lot of non-tangible things that need to happen, and understanding that is, I think, a huge challenge for your average person, because the knowledge barrier between where they're at and what needs to happen is a pretty challenging mountain to climb in terms of understanding the policy ramifications, the funding ramifications, the overall built environment ramifications. So I think the education is really the biggest barrier, especially because from a day-to-day basis, there's nothing really to show for it. It's just all ideas and visions and conceptual concepts that don't have any tangible basis. So I think that's the biggest challenge, regardless of what work any advocacy organization is doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thanks for answering that question, because I think that the more we can do chats like this, and the more that we can check in with the organizations that we work with and kind of really hone in on the amount of work it takes just to grow an organization, increase your reach, help with development, and all of that stuff. Like you said, there's a lot of intangibles that lead up to actually impacting policy and actually making and taking the changes that we all want to see. So thanks for answering that. So what is Bike SD working on now that you'd like to share? What are a couple cool initiatives that you have going on?
There's two specific initiatives. The first one is as soon as the strategic framework was adopted, the board created, thanks to Andy's help, a committee structure to actually implement the strategic framework. So there's 4 committees that have been created, each of them headed by a board member. And we did an open call out to our membership and all our supporters to sign up for a committee that they could volunteer in. And the each of those committees then have a specific focus. So for example, there's a policy and advocacy focus. There is a fundraising, development, and event focus. And then formalizing the structure of that committee, the understanding what the role of the individuals within that committee is, and what the end goal and outcomes are. That's been taking up most of my time, because we want to understand also what works and what doesn't work, how to meet people where they're at, because not everyone has the ability to necessarily meet in person on a regular basis, understanding how to phase the introduction of our work into volunteers, especially meeting them in terms of their time commitments. Formalizing all of that has taken a little bit of time. And the second part that second component that I'm working on, which has a lot to do with the fundraising events, is putting together a ride. It's called the Midnight Madness Bicycle Ride. It's a ride that starts at midnight, and it's about a 15-mile ride. It's family friendly, and we're shooting for a launch date either towards the end of December or beginning of January. Streets will be closed. It's going to be a really fun ride. People dress up typically. If you can imagine sort of a fun parade, dress up ride on it. So that's the sort of the second thing we're working on.
Cool, I like that. It's good that you guys are in San Diego. I'm in Cleveland, so a Midnight Madness ride in December, early January in Cleveland would probably turn into madness. But that's cool. That's a good idea. Did you say people are going to be? Did you say they're going to be able to wear costumes, or they're going to be encouraged to wear costumes?
Yes. It's a ride. Yes, this is a ride actually that's been going on for about 40 years by another organization called the Hostling International, and they wanted an organization that does advocacy work specific to bicycling to essentially manage the ride, and so we purchased the rights to do the ride itself.
Gotcha.
So this ride has a history. Organization? The organization is called the Hostling International, so it's the organization that has hostels in almost all major cities in the country, well, the world.
That's cool. So they're going to be wearing costumes. What are some other things that they'll be able to do at that event?
There's
family friendly.
Yes,
is there an age limit?
There's no age limit. It's family friendly. People are welcome to decorate their bikes in whatever lighting they want. If you can imagine some sort of a themed ride, and you're more than welcome to come out from Cleveland to San Diego in December if you're so inclined.
Yeah, that's cool. And if I can't, I will get my uncle in Menifee to come out there.
Excellent.
All right. So how do people get involved? How do they sign up with Bike SD, or how do they get more information about the stuff that you guys are doing?
Well, the best way is to sign up for our newsletter. The link's on our website. If you go to bikesd.org, there's a link on how to get involved. If people don't have the time to be involved, but they want to contribute, there's links to do so too, or join our membership roster as well. So there's, but the newsletter is by far the easiest and quickest way to get informed about what's going on.
Great. Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. So, Andy, did you work on your mic yet? I saw you type that you weren't able to. No? No, he's not able to. Andy, thanks so much for being here. We're sorry that we couldn't hear from you. But maybe when we check in with you guys middle of next year, you will have microphone issues worked out.
Maybe.
And Sam, thank you so much for joining and answering the questions, but also in doing the blog series with me. So I really appreciate that.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And so good. Good work to you guys, and good luck with your continued implementation of your plan and the implementation of your finalized committee structure. I'm looking forward to hearing more from Bike SD. So thanks, everyone. This is John Spalding with S&G Endeavors, and if you want to look us up for a facilitation, we'll be more than happy to talk with you about how to increase advocacy and collaboration in your organization. This was an interview with Sam Ollinger from Bike SD and Andy Kopp, and we appreciate you watching. Have a great day.
Bye.